Thank you very much indeed. And the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, presented the 2026 national budget this week. But did the budget set the right tone for the youth, growth and inequality? For more on this now, we speak to a budget analyst at Section 27 and a member of the Budget Justice Coalition, Matshidiso Lencoasa, and the President of the South African Youth Business Chamber, Siphila Dlamini. They're joining us in studio this morning. Thank you very much for making it at our studios here in Auckland Park. And I think, Ms. Lencoasa, let me start with you, ladies first. I mean, as you know, the Budget Justice Coalition, you basically felt that the budget had prioritised the country's most urgent crises. Is that correct?
So not exactly. And firstly, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
So our view of the budget 2026 has
actually fails.
Yes, exactly. It's been quite critical of the budget because while there has been progress in some regards, which we welcome and we can explore more on, we still feel that it doesn't best position our economy in the country to address some of the most urgent crises that are facing our country, particularly for young people. So we know that, and I think the Finance Minister often refers to the triple challenge of poverty, inequality and unemployment in our country.
Right.
But then when you look at the interventions towards social programs, towards social infrastructure and towards job creation, looking at hiring more nurses, doctors, teachers, community healthcare workers, we feel that the budget constrains departments, provincial departments especially, and government from being able to do this, and really holds us back from generating an economy that in turn builds a country that works for all.
Yeah, and the framing of the budget itself had been of, you know, a budget that was marking a historic turning point. Do you believe that, in light of what you've just shared now, a historic turning point serving as, I guess, you know, trying to address some of these social crises? Do you believe that?
So not exactly, because what we see is that there has been a step forward, but also a step back in that way. So I think my fellow panelists will speak more to some of the, you know, interventions around SMMEs, which we welcome because we felt that for years they have been undermined. And so that's the step forward. But then in terms of en masse really addressing youth unemployment as a crisis, we really feel that there isn't allocations towards that, and also investments in building the capacity of our state to spend every single rand that goes towards social programs. We really think that we know that the problems in our communities, as we engage with communities across the country, that clinics are falling apart, schools there's so much overcrowding, and there's under-resourcing and understaffing in those areas. And yet when you look at the budget, all it does at best, it will maintain the current number of doctors, nurses and teachers, but it's not actually going to meaningfully expand that. And so we don't see that the quality of public services will be particularly a better resource to be you know, sufficiently greater, and also don't see any interventions towards hiring more of these unemployed graduates of doctors, nurses, teachers, community health workers.
And I mean, you as the South African Youth Business Chamber were consulted when it comes to this budget. For the relief that you speak of, you're quite excited about the relief for a tax on small businesses.
Yes,
essentially.
Firstly, thank you for having us, Chris. Now, it's important for us to say as the Chamber that we aren't where we want the budget to be, essentially, but we are of the view that we've taken steps forward for the betterment of our country's economy, and most importantly for an environment that supports youth entrepreneurs and young businesses. It's important that our country is able to, any young person from Soweto or Hammanskraal or Nkomazi must be able to start a business. And the constraints that have existed in the past prevented that, and in turn prevented young people taking their future in their hands by creating employment. So we welcome the interventions, the tax threshold being increased, as well as the other measures that have been put in place to better support SMMEs. However, we still are of the view that more must be done, but for now, it's a step in the right direction, and we have confidence in the projected growth.
And you're saying, Ms. Lencoasa, that, I mean, what we saw, if I could just see, it says actively and deliberately aligned against the material interests of the working class and the poor. Talk to us a bit about that. You did touch on it much, but just about more of what you believe could have been done better to ensure that the poor and the working class are cushioned?
Sure. So I think one of the most important interventions that we've long been calling for is greater consultation with the ordinary people in our country in shaping this budget, so that it can be a budget that's by the people, for the people, because after all, even the working class and the poor in our country, we're all taxpayers and we're all contributing. This is public money, and when they're allocating and they're saying this is a pro-infrastructure budget, for instance, we expect to see that the clinics that are falling apart in the northwest, for example, that after the Parliament's oversight has been done, that there is an intervention, that we're not just allocating money, but we actually see a clinic that's refurbished. We see more schools, because we saw admissions crisis because of so many learners who are unplaced because there's just not enough infrastructure and not enough schools, right? And so those are some of those interventions. I think another thing that we were quite disappointed to see is around social grants. And so, of course, we would love to see an economy that can absorb the millions of young people who would who are looking for employment and who are looking for jobs. But unfortunately, our economy is not able to do that. And so what we have is that many young people rely on grants, interventions like the social relief of distress grants, but that grant has remained the same. So that 370, it's being eroded by inflation, yes, but also it also means that most young people actually have been, young people use the 370 grant for transport to go look for jobs, many jobs that are not even there. And so it also constrains the ability of it, plus the fuel levy going up. That combination means that 370 doesn't go as far in helping or positioning young people to be able to find meaningful work in this economy.
And I mean, what are the stumbling blocks to economic growth, to ensuring that young people do get access to these jobs? Is the stickler the issue of corruption, where monies that are meant for exactly what you speak of are being siphoned? Very few people are being held to account for that. We're not really going to make any headway, I guess, if we don't take the issue of corruption, deal with that, and channel those monies into areas where they're supposed to be channeled to.
That is correct. One of the pillars that the Chamber has adopted going forward is the protection of key state institutions, which means that we must ensure that the institutions function properly. Money that is allocated for youth development, for infrastructure, must go where it needs to be. So what we've then resolved as the Chamber is that going forward, we are going to be playing it is too late now in our democracy to be playing in the streets protesting. The courts must answer a call. We'll be going to the courts quite a lot. There's already quite a number of departments and state institutions that we are going to be holding accountable. A large part to unemployment is that telecommunications. There's poor telecommunications in most outskirts areas in Mpumalanga, in the Eastern Cape. Where I come from, if you're home for December, you don't have connectivity. So the young people that stay there, how are they going to apply for jobs or apply for university?
But there
or
also
trade
needs to be
online?
a willingness from departments like that in order to ensure if you have a child who is staying in the suburb, the one who is in the rural area, and you'd find during that very December is when some of them are putting through applications to go to your universities or whatever it is, that is the gateway to getting these opportunities. So it's a myriad of challenges interlinked that need different departments to come together to ensure that the end goal is that of dealing with unemployment amongst young people, ensuring that they have access to better opportunities. So I agree with what you were saying. How then do we resolve that? Why are these departments that are supposed to be handling these things not talking to each other?
The big elephant in the room is IGR is failing. The intergovernmental relations is not doing anything, because if the Department of Communications identifies that telecommunications is an issue, you bring in municipalities, you bring in other stakeholders that must ensure the infrastructure and the support is there. And also, as well, there's no political will from the likes of ICASA, which is why we're going to be taking them to court very soon, because of the solutions like Starlink. There's Chinese entities as well, similar to Starlink, that have said we're willing to bring telecommunications into
But there's a backlash regarding Starlink and South Africa. that you'd be very much aware of.
Yes. No, we fully agree. Starlink is not the only solution or the only service provider in this regard. There's other partners in China, in Russia that have applied through ICASA to render such services, but there's no political will. And we take that as an attack on young people, because there's e-commerce now, which makes a lot of money for our country's GDP, but young people in rural areas cannot participate because they cannot communicate. So part of that is why we feel that state institutions must be protected. So we are going to take the necessary steps, but it also demands political will. It demands leaders who understand that young people are not a by-the-way subject. We are stakeholders in this country's future and in this country's present.
And speaking of subjects, I mean, we have to evolve in terms of what we teach our children in these schools. What I learned that many years ago was applicable for where I am now. But you need young people to get involved in, e-commerce, AI, the responsible use of AI. How that's where the world is moving towards. Those are the jobs in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years, in the next 2 years that are going to be advertised. And you find that our young people are not equipped with that. The first time that a young person in the rural school uses a computer is when they move to university. So how do we bridge those gaps? We could speak until we blew in the face about making these opportunities available, but they're only going to be available to a certain section of society, and young people in the rural areas are going to be left out.
Yes. Absolutely, and I think that is really the crux of it. And as civil society, what we've been calling for is a recognition of the tools that we have at our disposal to better equip young people to be able to participate actively in this growing, changing economy, but also changing global economy. And I think that when you look at unemployment in this country, yes, even when our economy is growing at a much better rate than it has over the past few years, unfortunately, young people are still not being absorbed into that economic growth. So the economy is growing, but it's leaving us behind. And you wonder why is that? And when you look at what the sectors or the industries that are growing, it tends to be quite skills-based. To your point about what are we equipping young people and the next generation with. And so they tend to be more skills-based and less labor-intensive industries that are growing the economy. And so it does exacerbate the inequality in our country. And that's why we've been calling for a budget that foregrounds that and best positions our country and rebuilds that social cohesion, because right now we're disconnected because of this inequality. The lived experiences of young people in the rural areas is not really reflected upon directly in the budget in the same way that that we are experiencing. And so we're really calling for greater public participation also in shaping a budget that actually addresses the social crises that we are facing.
I wish we had more time. Thank you very much to you both. We do appreciate you coming to studio. Thanks a lot. That was Matshidiso Lencoasa and Siphila Dlamini with us here in studio, just reflecting on the budget and what more needs to be done to ensure that decisions that are made regarding that budget do benefit young people.